The Galactic Council chamber glowed like a universe trapped inside glass. Thousands of stars shimmered above the dome, their light reflecting off walls made of crystal and alloy. Beneath that light, hundreds of alien delegates sat in their curved silver seats, each one a representative of a proud and ancient race. The air was filled with murmurs, laughter, and quiet arrogance. At the center of the hall stood a single human, tall, calm, and perfectly still. His gray uniform bore no medals or decoration, only the insignia of the Terran Union, a small blue flame. He had been summoned to speak on behalf of humanity, but the way the others looked at him made it clear that his words would not be heard. Humans always talk about peace, said a scaled alien with golden eyes, his voice dripping with mockery. Peace, cooperation, harmony. Yet they are born on a death world, are they not? They pretend to be civilized while living among monsters. The hall erupted in laughter. A long, insectoid creature clicked its mandibles and added, "They should be studied, not negotiated with. They are wild animals who learned how to wear clothes." The sound of amusement spread through the chamber like static. The human remained still, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes steady but kind. He waited for the noise to fade before he spoke. "We do not come to argue," he said quietly, his voice soft but firm. "We come to remind the Council that peace is not a weakness. It is a choice." His translator device echoed his words in a dozen languages. Yet instead of respect, his calmness only drew more laughter. "Listen to him," one alien shouted. "He thinks kindness will save his kind from extinction." Another leaned back in his chair, grinning. "You humans talk too much. You should learn your place among the stars." The ambassador tilted his head slightly, as if studying a strange insect. His face was unreadable. "We know our place," he said softly. "We've simply outgrown the need to prove it." The laughter faltered, but only for a moment before another wave of ridicule filled the chamber. The council speaker, a towering reptilian creature covered in ceremonial armor, slammed his staff on the floor. "Enough of this performance," he said, his voice booming. "The humans have always been an emotional species. They speak of patience while hiding claws beneath their smiles. Tell us, Ambassador, how long will your kind keep pretending to be peaceful?" For a few seconds, silence filled the chamber. The human looked up, meeting the speaker's glowing eyes. Then he smiled again, slowly, deliberately. "As long as we must," he said. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "We'd rather talk than fight. We've learned patience." His words lingered, soft as breath. But something about his tone made the laughter fade. The speaker narrowed his eyes. "You say that as though it is a warning." The ambassador placed his hand on the translation device on the table. "It isn't a warning," he said gently. "It's a truth." And then, before anyone could speak, he turned the translator off. The sudden silence felt heavy. The council stared in confusion as the human slowly removed the small device from his ear and set it on the table. Without it, his voice could no longer be automatically translated, but he didn't need it anymore. When he spoke next, his words carried a weight that reached every ear even without translation. "You have mistaken our calm for surrender," he said, his tone lower, colder. "You have mistaken our silence for weakness. That was your first mistake." The entire hall froze. The faint hum of energy in the chamber seemed to grow louder, as if even the air was listening. One alien tried to laugh, but it came out thin and nervous. "Is this supposed to scare us?" he asked. The human didn't reply. Instead, he looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate one by one. His gaze was steady, almost kind, but behind that calm was something else, something ancient and dangerous. For centuries, humanity had endured the Council's arrogance. They had been mocked for their emotions, their passion, their refusal to bow to alien logic. But no one in that chamber understood that the calm they mocked was not submission, it was restraint. The human leaned forward slightly. "You wanted to test our patience," he said softly. "You've succeeded." The speaker frowned. "What do you mean?" The ambassador didn't answer. He simply turned and began to walk toward the door, his steps slow, deliberate, echoing in the silence. As the great doors opened, he paused for a moment and looked back over his shoulder. His expression was still polite, but his eyes no longer held warmth. "You should have left well enough alone," he said. "Because now, you've reminded us who we are." He walked out, the heavy doors closing behind him with a deep metallic thud. The chamber remained silent. No one laughed. No one moved. The speaker's voice, usually so commanding, sounded small when he finally spoke. What did he mean? Outside, beyond the shimmering dome of the council world, the vastness of space stirred. Human ships, unmarked, silent, and invisible to most scanners, began to shift into new formations. Across the stars, long-dormant Terran fleets powered on for the first time in centuries. Communications channels across human colonies went dark, one after another. The galaxy had always thought of humans as strange, emotional creatures who hid behind diplomacy. They had never understood the truth, that diplomacy was humanity's way of keeping peace until peace was no longer an option. Inside the chamber, the delegates started to whisper again, but their laughter never returned. Somewhere deep inside, even the proudest among them felt the first flicker of fear. They remembered the old stories, the wars humanity had survived, the worlds they had built from ruin, the way they had always risen stronger after every defeat. They had called them Deathworlders as an insult, never realizing how true the word was. Far beyond the Council's reach, in the cold silence of space, a Terran admiral stood on the bridge of a massive ship. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim blue light of the command deck as she watched the fleet come online. "The ambassador has left the chamber," her officer reported. The admiral nodded once. "Then it begins," she said. The hum of engines filled the air as thousands of human ships turned toward the Council's worlds. In that single quiet moment, the galaxy's laughter died, and the storm humanity had kept buried for centuries began to awaken. The laughter that had once filled the grand chamber of the Galactic Council was gone, replaced by a silence that felt like pressure, thick, heavy, and uncomfortable. The alien delegates shifted uneasily in their seats, avoiding each other's eyes. The human ambassador's last words still echoed in their minds like a haunting note they couldn't escape: "You've mistaken silence for weakness." The council speaker, a massive reptilian creature named Dravik, slammed his clawed hand against the table, trying to regain control of the room. "They are bluffing," he growled. "Humans bark louder than they bite." His words sounded confident, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Deep down, even Dravik felt it. Something had changed. The humans had walked out, and the air itself seemed to carry a warning. Outside the council hall, ships began to move. No one saw them yet, not even the patrol sensors orbiting the council's capital world. They moved quietly, like shadows beneath light. The Terran fleets had always been small, their ships rarely seen beyond the borders of human colonies. The Council had assumed this was because humans were weak, cautious, afraid of confrontation. But the truth was far different. Humanity had hidden its strength not out of fear, but because it was unnecessary, until now. Over the following days, the Council tried to dismiss the ambassador's words. Galactic media mocked humanity once again, broadcasting endless talk shows about human dramatics and death-world delusions. Pundits laughed, declaring that the humans were too dependent on the Council's technology to ever fight back. But as the laughter continued, small things began to go wrong. The first sign came from the Crick system, home to one of the Council's largest shipyards. Overnight, all production stopped. Every machine, every forge, every automated arm froze mid-motion. The engineers couldn't explain it. "The systems won't respond," they said. "It's like the code is rejecting us." The Council sent teams of specialists, but nothing worked. Within 24 hours, 10 more shipyards reported the same issue. Then, entire communication networks began to collapse. At first, the Council blamed solar storms. But soon, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every affected system shared one thing in common. Human engineers had designed or upgraded them centuries ago. The networks that once made the galaxy hum with life were built on Terran architecture, because the humans had been the first species to unify galactic communication. They had written the base code that connected the stars. No one had ever questioned it. Now, one by one, those systems were going dark. In the Council's control tower, technicians worked frantically. "We can't reach the Vega colonies," one shouted. "Transmission lines are failing across sectors 7 through 10. Dravik's claws tightened around the edge of his table. "Reroute power," he ordered. "Find out who is behind this." His second-in-command turned, eyes wide with fear. "Sir, the humans built the relays. They're the only ones who can access the route." Dravik hissed. "Then shut them out." The technician swallowed. "We can't. They're already inside." The Council called an emergency meeting. For the first time in decades, every seat was filled. The hall buzzed with panic. "They are sabotaging us," shouted one delegate. "This is an act of war." Another banged his fist against the table. "Then we must strike before they do." But others were not so certain. "Strike where?" asked an elderly, winged diplomat. "We don't even know where their fleets are. They're ghosts in the void." In the chaos, a new message appeared on the central holodisplay. No one had sent it. It simply materialized, flickering blue with the emblem of Earth. The entire chamber froze. Slowly, white text appeared across the screen. "You've had centuries of peace. You used it to mock those who gave it to you." The message paused for a moment before continuing. Peace was never weakness. It was mercy. Panic erupted again. Some shouted for military readiness. Others demanded immediate negotiation. Dravik tried to speak above the noise, but no one listened. For the first time, the Council was powerless. Their communication systems no longer obeyed their commands. Their ships were stranded, unable to receive new navigation data. Entire fleets were frozen in space. Across the galaxy, something darker began to unfold. Reports came in from border systems. Human colonies that had been quiet for years were sealed off. No transmissions, no travel allowed. Alien traders who tried to approach were warned away by automated defenses. "The humans have cut us off," one merchant cried during a transmission before his signal vanished. The Council ordered a reconnaissance team to investigate. They never returned. Back on the Council homeworld, Dravik sat alone in his quarters, staring at a data crystal that displayed the last image captured by the reconnaissance drones. It showed a Terran fleet, not one or two ships, but hundreds. Massive vessels built in silence, hidden for centuries, their hulls dark and reflective like obsidian. No lights, no insignias, just the faint blue glow of their engines. Dravik zoomed in on one of the ships and felt his breath catch. It bore a single phrase painted across its side: "We tried to talk." He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The humans had been planning this, he realized, not for months or years, but for generations. They had built their fleets under the Council's very nose, disguising them as science ships, as freighters, as relics. While the Council had laughed at their weakness, humanity had been preparing for the day patience would end. Meanwhile, across the stars, alien citizens began to panic. Markets collapsed, factories stopped production, and fear spread faster than any broadcast. The word humans was now spoken with trembling respect. Old records resurfaced, ancient files documenting humanity's wars before they joined the Council. Images of scorched planets, cities reduced to dust, armies that fought until the last heartbeat. The Council had forgotten who they were dealing with. Humanity didn't seek war, but when pushed, they never fought halfway. In one darkened Council meeting room, Dravik looked at his advisors. "They want to show us what happens when their calm ends," he said bitterly. "And what happens when it does?" one asked. Dravik looked up at the stars outside the window. "Then," he whispered, "we'll understand why Deathworlders were never meant to be underestimated." Somewhere far from the Council's reach, on a human command ship hidden beyond known space, the Terran admiral stood at a large glass viewport. The stars reflected in her eyes like embers. "Status?" she asked. "Their systems are failing sector by sector," her officer replied. "They still think it's malfunction." The Admiral smiled faintly. Good. Let them laugh a little longer. She turned to her crew, her voice calm but sharp. For centuries, they've called us emotional. They'll see soon enough what emotion looks like when it has purpose. As her ship drifted through the dark, fleets of human warships began to emerge from hyperspace, silent, precise, and waiting for a single command. The era of quiet diplomacy was over. Humanity's polite mode had ended. And across the stars, the galaxy began to feel what true patience finally running out truly meant. The galaxy was unraveling piece by piece, and no one could stop it. The Council's proud systems, once the most advanced in the known universe, were falling into silence. Ships drifted powerless between stars, communication relays blinked out one after another, and even the great trading networks that had bound entire civilizations together now lay dead and quiet. It had taken less than a week for humanity's calm retaliation to reach every corner of the galaxy, and not a single shot had been fired. No fleets had invaded. No armies had marched. The humans had simply turned everything off. In the capital's towering skyline, the Council's communication center was chaos. Technicians shouted over one another, their voices cracking with fear. We've lost contact with Sector 12. The relay network isn't responding. Our defense grids are offline. The speaker, Dravik, entered the command hall, his heavy armor scraping against the metal floor. Report, he barked. One of his officers turned, trembling. It's everywhere, sir. Every system the humans helped build has gone dark. It's like they've taken their technology and turned it against us. Dravik clenched his jaw. Impossible, he muttered. They wouldn't destroy the very systems that keep them alive. Another officer hesitated before replying. They haven't destroyed anything, sir. They've disconnected it. The human colonies are still fully operational. It's only the Council's networks that are failing. Dravik stared at the holographic map of the galaxy. Red lights flashed across almost every system under Council control. They're isolating us, he whispered. They're cutting the galaxy in half. Outside the chamber, the city's skyline flickered like dying stars. Power outages rippled through the metropolis as one district after another plunged into darkness. The great alien city, once considered untouchable, was now reduced to candlelight and fear. In the streets, citizens panicked. Crowds filled the plazas, shouting questions no one could answer. Where are the ships? Why can't we contact our colonies? What did the humans do? Soldiers tried to calm them, but even their weapons had lost power. The pulse rifles, designed using human energy cores, were useless. Everything humanity had ever touched was failing, and that meant everything the galaxy relied upon. Meanwhile, in a hidden sector far beyond the Council's reach, humanity watched in silence. On the bridge of the Terran flagship Horizon, Admiral Lyra Kane stood before a vast projection of the galaxy, the Council territories blinking red one by one. Sector 14 confirmed dark, her officer reported. Their fleets are grounded. No movement detected. Lyra nodded slowly. Good, she said softly. No casualties, no destruction. Just silence. Another officer turned toward her. The Council is demanding contact. Do we respond? The Admiral's expression didn't change. No, she said. They wanted our attention. Now they have our silence. Let them sit with it. Back in the Council chamber, desperation was spreading like infection. Delegates shouted accusations at one another, their voices breaking through the hum of failing power systems. This is sabotage, one cried. They've been planning this for centuries. Then we must retaliate, shouted another. We can't, came the reply. Our fleets can't even launch. The speaker slammed his staff against the floor. Enough, he roared. The room fell quiet. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling with anger and fear. The humans are testing us. They think they can humiliate us into submission. We will show them that the Council still rules this galaxy. But even as he spoke, his personal communicator flickered to life. A holographic projection appeared above the table, and every delegate froze. It was the human ambassador, the same man who had walked out of this very chamber only days ago. He stood in the projection with the same calm expression, his grey uniform perfectly pressed, his hands folded behind his back. "Ambassador," Dravik hissed. "You dare?" The man interrupted him, his voice smooth and quiet. "You've had your turn to speak. Now, you'll listen." The room fell silent. The hologram's eyes scanned across the crowd of alien leaders. "For generations, humanity tolerated your mockery," he said. "We came to your meetings, listened to your insults, and built your worlds while you laughed at us. You called us emotional, dangerous, irrational, and perhaps we are. But we never broke the peace, not once. You mistook restraint for fear. You mistook patience for submission. That was your mistake." Dravik leaned forward, his claws gripping the edge of his podium. "What do you want?" he demanded. The human's expression didn't change. "We want nothing," he said simply. "You've already taken everything we offered and spat on it. We gave you peace. We gave you technology. We gave you trust. And you gave us mockery in return." The image flickered slightly, his tone growing colder. "Now, we're taking back what was ours." The hologram vanished. The chamber erupted again, but this time in panic, not argument. The speaker barked orders. "Contact every ship. Find them. Strike back before they—" "Sir," an aide shouted. "The fleets aren't responding. Their navigation AIS are locked out. The systems have all reverted to human command codes." Dravik turned pale. "You mean, they can control our ships?" The aide swallowed. "They already are." At that same moment, across dozens of star systems, Council fleets went dark. Ship after ship drifted powerless as their controls failed. Crew members screamed over the comms, "Our engines are offline. We can't move." In orbit around the planet Kazara, one of the Council's largest dreadnoughts powered down completely. The crew could only watch in horror as their own ship systems came alive again, not under their control. The massive cannons turned downward, aimed directly at the planet's surface. Then, without a single human on board, the dreadnought transmitted a single line of text to every Council world: "You built your strength on our foundations. Now, feel what happens when we take it away." And then, the dreadnought exploded, controlled demolition from within, precise and silent. The blast was visible across the system, a glowing symbol of power wrapped in restraint. The humans had not targeted the people. They had targeted the arrogance. Back on the Council capital, Dravik sat motionless. His advisors whispered around him, their voices full of panic. "We have to beg for peace," one said. "They'll destroy us if we don't." Dravik's claws dug into the table. "They won't destroy us," he said slowly. "If they wanted war, we'd already be dead. No, this isn't war. This is humiliation." He was right. Humanity wasn't waging war. They were teaching. Every system failure, every blackout, every silence was a lesson. A reminder of how much the galaxy had taken from them and how much it had relied on their calm. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon, Admiral Lyra received a transmission. "Ambassador Reeve has completed contact," her officer reported. "The Council is panicking. Shall we proceed with Phase 2? Lyra nodded. "Yes," she said. "They wanted to see what happens when patience ends. Let them witness it fully." The officer hesitated. "And after that?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked out the viewport at the swirling galaxies beyond. "After that," she said softly, "we remind them why it was mercy they mocked." The command deck fell silent as the Admiral raised her hand. "Execute." Far away, in every corner of the galaxy, humanity moved in perfect silence. Fleets shifted into position. Old colonies lit up like stars awakening after centuries of slumber. The Council had laughed at humanity's calm. Now, they would see what happened when that calm was gone, and the storm beneath finally woke. The galaxy was breaking under its own arrogance. The Council had mocked humanity's calm for centuries, believing the Deathworlders too primitive, too emotional to challenge their rule. Now that same calm had vanished, and the galaxy trembled. Communication lines remained dead, power grids unstable, and entire fleets had gone dark, drifting helplessly through the void. Every attempt to restore order only revealed new layers of chaos. The humans had not fired a single weapon, yet they had brought the galaxy to its knees. The calm storm they once laughed at was now consuming them from within. In the Council's command tower, the tension was unbearable. The air smelled of burnt circuits and fear. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered in emergency session, their voices overlapping in panic. "We must retaliate," screamed one, his insectoid wings fluttering wildly. "With what?" another snapped. "Our ships don't even respond." "They've hijacked everything," shouted a third. The council speaker, Dravik, stood at the center of the storm, his reptilian face pale, eyes burning with anger. "Enough!" he roared, slamming his staff into the floor. "You all speak of fear when we should speak of action. The humans cannot control the entire galaxy. We will restore order." But even as he spoke, a faint blue light filled the room. Every console, every holoscreen flickered and turned bright. The light pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The noise died instantly. Every delegate turned to face the massive central screen as an image began to form. It was the human ambassador. He stood tall, dressed in the same gray uniform, calm as always. But this time, there was no warmth in his eyes. Behind him, the faint outline of a warship glowed, a Terran vessel, silent and sleek, its hull marked with a single phrase, "We warned you." The ambassador's voice filled the chamber, steady and cold. "You believed our patience infinite," he said. "You mistook kindness for cowardice. You laughed at peace and built your empire on mockery. But we warned you. We told you that silence is not submission." His tone never rose, yet every word felt like thunder. "For centuries, you called us emotional. Perhaps you were right. Because today, we remember." Dravik stepped forward, slamming his claws on the table. "You can't do this," he growled. "You're violating every treaty, every law the council." The ambassador's image turned slightly, his head tilting as if studying an insect. "Treaties?" he repeated softly. "The same treaties you broke whenever it suited you? The same laws that enslaved smaller species while you called it diplomacy?" His gaze hardened. "You created a council to control others. We built one to unite them. That is the difference between you and us." Before Dravik could respond, the image vanished. The room plunged into silence again, broken only by the hum of failing lights. Then, a distant rumble shook the tower. The delegates froze. Outside, the skies above the capital world turned crimson as the planet's defense satellites activated on their own. But they weren't responding to council command. The systems had been taken. In orbit, massive human ships appeared, silent, unmarked, their sleek black hulls blotting out the stars. They didn't fire. They didn't move. They simply hovered above the capital like executioners waiting for the final word. Panic erupted in the streets. Citizens fled as alarms blared across the city. Fighter squadrons scrambled into the sky, but their engines sputtered and died before reaching orbit. The humans had disabled them effortlessly. Then, one by one, every screen across the planet lit up again. Streets, homes, even personal wrist devices, all showing the same message: you mocked peace. Now, witness its absence. Dravik watched from the council tower's balcony, his scales reflecting the red light of the burning sky. He couldn't look away. "Why aren't they firing?" one of his aides whispered. "Why are they just waiting?" Dravik didn't answer. He already knew. Humanity wasn't here to conquer. They were here to demonstrate. This wasn't war. This was a lesson. In orbit, Admiral Lyra Kane watched from the bridge of her flagship Horizon. Her voice was calm as she issued orders. "Deploy observation drones," she said. "No bombardment. No casualties. Let them see." Her officers hesitated. They've deployed planetary shields. Should we disable them?" Lyra smiled faintly. "No need. They'll shut off soon enough." Seconds later, as if responding to her words, The planet's shimmering blue defense shield flickered, then vanished. All across the bridge, the crew exchanged stunned looks. "Confirmed," said the tactical officer. Their entire defense grid just turned itself off. Lyra stepped closer to the viewport, her eyes reflecting the dying light of the Council world below. "They laughed at our calm," she murmured. "Let's see how they handle our silence." She raised her hand. "Activate Phase 3. Across the galaxy, dormant Terran satellites that had been orbiting for centuries came to life. Massive waves of energy spread through the stars, erasing Council communication frequencies. Every world under Council control went dark in unison. In a single coordinated pulse, humanity had silenced an entire civilization. And still, they hadn't fired a shot. Down on the surface, the Council's command network collapsed completely. Ships fell from the sky, not in explosions, but in quiet surrender. The city's power grid failed, and the once golden capital plunged into darkness. Dravik stood surrounded by terrified aides, his voice breaking. "Contact them. Tell them we surrender." One of his officers shook his head frantically. "They're not responding. They're not demanding anything. They're just watching us." Dravik stared up at the hovering Terran fleet, those dark, silent giants that neither attacked nor spoke. His claws trembled. "This isn't war," he whispered. "It's judgment." He turned toward his advisors, eyes wide with the weight of realization. "They don't want our surrender. They want us to understand." Far above, aboard the horizon, Admiral Lyra received confirmation from her intelligence officer. "All sectors silent. The Council has gone completely dark." Lyra nodded slowly, then turned toward her crew. "Begin transmission." Across the galaxy, the Terran message played everywhere, simple, calm, and final. The voice of the ambassador echoed through every remaining working device. "You wanted to test the limits of human patience. You have found them. Remember this day, not as the day we fought, but as the day we stopped pretending." The message ended, and for the first time in recorded galactic history, every system fell silent. No chatter, no trade, no broadcasts. Just the quiet hum of human ships waiting in the dark. On the surface of the Council's world, Dravik sank to his knees on the marble floor of the ruined hall. Around him, the delegates whispered prayers to gods long forgotten. The once mighty Council had been reduced to a single frightened planet under the gaze of a species they had called too emotional. The irony was unbearable. Above them, the Terran fleet began to move again. Slow, deliberate, and silent. But they did not fire. They simply turned and left, one by one, disappearing into the stars. Humanity had no interest in conquering. They had made their point. The galaxy's lesson was carved not in fire, but in silence. Humanity's calm was never weakness. It was the final barrier before the storm. And now, the Council knew what it truly meant when that calm ended. The galaxy was in ruins, yet not a single city had been bombed. Not one world had been invaded. Humanity had waged a war without firing a single shot, and they had won it completely. The Council's empire, once a shining monument to order and control, now lay crippled and terrified. Entire systems sat in darkness. Trade, defense, travel, communication, everything had been built atop Terran systems. And humanity had simply unplugged them. The result was not an explosion, but a suffocating silence that reached into every corner of the stars. On the surface of the Council's capital world, the once bustling city of Valerith had become a graveyard of light. Its golden towers now stood black and lifeless, streets filled with alien citizens clutching dim glowsticks and speaking in hushed voices. The fear wasn't from what humanity had done. It was from what they hadn't done. The humans had the power to destroy the galaxy, but they had chosen not to. That restraint terrified the Council more than any weapon ever could. Inside the Council hall, Speaker Dravik sat alone, his claws digging deep grooves into the wooden table. Around him, the other delegates whispered nervously, too afraid to speak loudly. The room that had once been full of laughter and arrogance was now cold and silent. Finally, one of the smaller delegates, a frail, feathered creature named Ka Ren, spoke in a trembling voice. They've stopped responding to every transmission. No threats, no demands. Just silence. What do they want from us? Dravik's eyes burned as he stared at the blue flame symbol still flickering faintly on the council's central monitor. They don't want anything, he said quietly. That's what makes it worse. He turned to face the assembly. You don't understand. Humans never strike for power. They strike for principle. They will not ask for our submission. They will wait until we realize it ourselves. Another delegate slammed his fist on the table. This is madness. We can't let them hold the entire galaxy hostage. Dravik's gaze snapped toward him, voice like thunder. You think they care about power? You think they need us? They could have burned every one of our worlds to dust, and yet we're still alive. That's not mercy, it's judgment. They are showing us what we became without them. The room fell silent again. Outside, faint tremors rippled through the air as the planet's orbital defense stations deactivated one by one. Even the sky seemed dimmer, as if afraid to shine under human eyes. Far beyond the Council's reach, humanity watched from their strongholds. In the command center of the Terran flagship Horizon, Admiral Lyra Kane stood surrounded by floating holograms displaying the paralyzed state of every major world. Sector 12, dark, her officer reported. No energy output for 72 hours. Sector 15, she asked. Still silent. Their fleets are stranded. Lyra nodded, her expression calm but unreadable. Good. Keep it that way. She turned toward the projection of the Council capital, now a speck of fading light in the void. They mocked our restraint, she murmured. Now they'll learn what it protects them from. Another officer hesitated. Should we move to the next phase? Lyra was quiet for a long moment, then shook her head. No. Let them feel it longer. Every hour of silence will teach them more than 1,000 battles ever could. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, stories began to spread. In the outer colonies, alien farmers spoke of seeing Terran ships hovering silently above their skies for hours before disappearing without a word. On one industrial world, every computer screen lit up with the same phrase before shutting down permanently: peace was never weakness. On another, a single Terran probe landed in a Council military base. It didn't attack. It played a recording, a calm human voice saying, "When you forget respect, you lose trust. Without trust, peace dies." Then it self-destructed, leaving no debris. The galaxy began to fracture. Species that had once followed the Council's commands now turned inward, closing their borders, afraid that humanity would come for them next. But humanity didn't come. They watched. They waited. The silence was worse than invasion. It was psychological warfare on a scale no one could comprehend. The galaxy began to eat itself alive under the weight of its own guilt. Days turned into weeks. On the Council capital, Dravik could barely sleep. The human words haunted him every time he closed his eyes. You've mistaken silence for weakness. He had thought them mere rhetoric, the dramatic words of a species too emotional for politics. Now he realized they were prophecy. Every time he looked out the window, he saw Terran ships hovering in the distance, unmoving and silent, like statues of judgment hanging in the void. He knew they could destroy everything with a thought, but they didn't. That patience was worse than death. Finally, Dravik decided to act. He called a meeting with what remained of the Council. Only a fraction of the members showed up. The rest had abandoned their posts or gone into hiding. The once great Council chamber was now a ghostly echo of what it had been. We can't survive like this, Ka Ren whispered. Our worlds are starving. Our fleets are powerless. We must beg them for forgiveness. Dravik stared at her for a long time, then sighed. You still think they want an apology? He leaned forward, his voice low. They don't want us to beg. They want us to understand. The others looked at him in confusion. Understand what? One delegate asked. Dravik rose slowly, walking toward the massive window overlooking the dead city. That peace, he said, was never theirs to give. It was a gift we failed to deserve. At that moment, the sky above the city lit up again. The Terran fleet was moving. Dozens of human ships descended slowly, their massive hulls blocking out the stars. No weapons armed, no shields raised, just that calm, terrible presence. The city fell into silence as every citizen stopped to stare at the sky. Then, a new transmission appeared on every remaining device in the galaxy. A single sentence, spoken in a quiet human voice. Patience ends, but understanding begins. On board the Horizon, Admiral Lyra watched as the Council's world filled her screen. "They're finally listening," her communications officer said softly. Lyra didn't smile. Her expression was distant, tired. "We never wanted them to suffer," she said. "We just wanted them to see." She turned away from the screen. "Send the recall signal. We're done here." Moments later, the massive Terran ships began to ascend, pulling away from orbit. No explosions. No destruction. Just the silent retreat of a force that had already proved everything it needed to. Across the galaxy, one by one, systems began to come back online. Power grids flickered to life. Communications resumed. But something fundamental had changed. The laughter was gone. The arrogance was gone. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and it would never forget it. On the Council world, Dravik stood on the balcony as the last human ship disappeared into the darkness. The sky cleared, the stars returning to their rightful glow. Around him, the city began to breathe again as lights flickered back to life. Yet he felt no relief, only shame. He turned to Ka Ren, his voice trembling. "They've restored everything. Why?" She looked at him with wide, sorrowful eyes. "Because, Speaker," she said softly, "they wanted to remind us that mercy is not weakness. It's power. And they hold it." Dravik stared at the horizon, where faint traces of blue light lingered among the stars. Humanity had gone silent once more, but now the galaxy understood that silence differently. It was not peace born of fear. It was peace born of power. A calm that could end worlds, but chose instead to protect them. And somewhere in that quiet, humanity's message still echoed. Soft, patient, eternal. We'd rather talk than fight. But if you force us to stop talking, you'll wish we never did. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, yet the silence of humanity still lingered across the stars. The galaxy had returned to motion, fleets flying again, lights shining once more, communication networks humming, but none of it felt the same. Every species moved with caution now, as if afraid the humans might be watching. Even laughter felt dangerous. The council had reconvened, smaller and quieter than before. Many of its grand members had resigned, ashamed or terrified to face the new reality. The once proud chamber that had echoed with mockery and arrogance now whispered only fear. Humanity had not destroyed them, yet somehow, they had broken everything that made them feel powerful. Speaker Dravik sat at the end of the long marble table, his claws folded together. The light above him flickered as holographic reports floated in the air. "Trade routes are operational again," one aide reported. "Power restored to all major systems." Dravik nodded, eyes hollow. "And the humans?" he asked quietly. "Still no contact," the aide replied. "They've vanished completely. No ships seen, no signals detected. It's as if they never existed." Dravik leaned back in his chair. That answer, somehow, frightened him more than if the humans had returned in force. For centuries, the Council had believed it controlled the galaxy through law, order, and technology. But humanity had shown them that control was an illusion, that the ones who built the foundation always hold the true power. Now that humanity had withdrawn, the galaxy was a house of glass, standing only because its destroyers had chosen to walk away. Elsewhere in the galaxy, whispers grew. Some claimed to have seen Terran fleets lurking at the edge of black holes, unmoving. Others swore entire systems had vanished overnight, replaced with silent stars that blinked in rhythmic pulses. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short again. Old captains recognized it immediately. The ancient human distress code, SOS. But no distress followed. It was a warning. Humanity was reminding them they were still out there, watching. On the council capitol, a faint tremor shook the city one evening. Alarms blared across the sky as something massive entered orbit. Dravik rushed to the balcony and looked upward. A colossal human ship, larger than any ever recorded, hung in the heavens like a dark moon. Its hull shimmered with faint blue lights, arranged in long, curving lines that pulsed like veins. Around it, smaller Terran vessels drifted silently, their engines glowing with the same soft hue. The entire planet froze. For hours, no one moved, no one spoke. Then, the ship broadcast a single message across every communication channel in the galaxy. The voice was calm, familiar. It was the human ambassador's. For centuries, you spoke while we listened, he said. You mocked while we built. You ruled while we endured. And still, we stayed silent. His tone deepened, filled with quiet gravity. Now you understand what silence can do. The message ended. No threats. No demands. Just that chilling reminder. And as suddenly as it had appeared, the great ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only a glowing trail in the sky. The message spread across every world within hours. Entire civilizations held emergency councils to discuss what it meant. Was it a warning? Some asked. A final message? Others wondered. But deep down, they all knew it was neither. It was reassurance. Humanity was letting them know they were still here, still watching, still capable of ending everything, but choosing not to. On the far edge of the galaxy, inside a hidden Terran fortress orbiting a red dwarf star, Admiral Lyra Kane watched the Council's response unfold across intercepted broadcasts. Her officers stood silent around her. They are panicking again, one said quietly. Lyra's gaze didn't move from the screen. Good, she replied softly. Fear reminds them to think before they act. Another officer frowned. Do you think they'll ever learn? Lyra exhaled slowly. Maybe not. But they'll remember. That's enough. She turned toward the massive viewport, where the endless field of stars shimmered like scattered glass. We don't need their gratitude, she continued. We just need their restraint. They built a galaxy on arrogance. We'll make sure it survives on humility. She paused for a long moment before whispering, we were too polite for too long. They mistook that for peace. Now they'll never mistake it again. Back on the council capitol, Speaker Dravik gathered his advisors for a private meeting. We must redefine everything, he said, voice trembling slightly. Trade, diplomacy, law, all of it must change. No more arrogance. No more pretending we control what we don't understand. One of the younger delegates, her skin shimmering like glass, asked quietly, do you think the humans will forgive us? Dravik shook his head. Forgiveness is a human word. We'll be lucky if they ever speak to us again. He looked toward the window, his reflection staring back at him in the darkness. They gave us a chance to live with our mistake. That is more mercy than we deserve. As months passed, the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Trade resumed, but every deal carried caution. Armies rebuilt, but never spoke of war against humanity. Every world now required Terran approval to restore certain technologies, systems humans had quietly locked away forever. And so, a strange balance emerged. The galaxy lived, but under humanity's unspoken shadow. Yet not everyone saw this as punishment. On smaller worlds, people began to speak of humanity with reverence. They called them the Silent Guardians, the Deathworlders who had mastered restraint. Some even prayed to them, whispered blessings before trade journeys or ship launches. A myth was forming, not of conquerors, but of watchers, those who could destroy everything but chose not to. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of Mars, in the Terran Union's command vault, the human ambassador stood before a vast display of the galaxy. His reflection glowed in the blue light of countless stars. They've begun to rebuild, reported one aide. The council is quieter now. Careful. The ambassador nodded. Good. Then they've learned something. He turned away, his face thoughtful, almost sad. It's strange, he said softly. We wanted peace, and we got it, but not the way we hoped. Admiral Lyra's voice came through the comms. They'll never see us the same again. The ambassador smiled faintly. Then maybe peace will last longer this time. As the screen dimmed, the hum of hidden Terran fleets filled the silence. Out there, beyond the light of known space, countless human ships waited in formation. Watching, protecting, reminding the galaxy what calm truly meant. Humanity had retreated from the stars not out of weakness, but wisdom. They had learned that true power wasn't in domination, it was in choosing not to use it. And though the galaxy breathed again, everyone knew one truth too deeply to forget. Humanity's calm was a promise. A fragile, beautiful promise that must never be broken again. Because if it ever was, the stars themselves would tremble once more. The silence that followed humanity's withdrawal had become the new rhythm of the galaxy. Trade resumed, fleets sailed, and planets glowed again. But nothing truly felt alive. Every transmission, every meeting, every speech carried hesitation. The Council, once the proud voice of galactic authority, now spoke in whispers. Each decision was weighed against a single unspoken question: what would the humans think? That thought haunted every hall, every world, every leader. Even in peace, the shadow of humanity hung over them all. Speaker Dravik sat alone in his private chamber overlooking the council capital. The city below had changed. Gone were the parades and fireworks of old. Now there was quiet efficiency, almost reverence. The people no longer mocked humanity as death welders. Instead, they spoke their name with the same cautious tone one might use for a sleeping god. Dravik knew the feeling well. Each night, he dreamt of the day the humans had turned off their translator, of the calm eyes of the ambassador, and the soft words that carried more power than any weapon: "You've mistaken silence for weakness." He hadn't understood it then. He did now. The chamber door slid open. Ka Ren, the feathered delegate who had once demanded forgiveness, entered carrying a datapad. "Speaker," she said softly, "the Reconstruction Council has sent their latest report." Dravik gestured for her to continue. "We've rebuilt 70% of the affected infrastructure," she said. "Energy flows are stable. Trade routes reconnected. But," she hesitated. "But what?" Dravik pressed. She met his gaze, her feathers trembling. "The human-coded systems. They still won't give us full access. Every time we try to modify them, they lock us out. It's as if someone is still watching." Dravik leaned back slowly, exhaling through his teeth. "They are watching," he said. "And that's exactly what keeps us alive." He stood and walked toward the massive window that framed the night sky. "You see those stars, Ka Ren? We used to think we ruled them. Now we know, we only rent them." His reflection stared back at him, old and weary. The humans could take everything again with a whisper. But they haven't. That restraint is their warning. At that same moment, far across the galaxy, aboard the Terran Command vessel Horizon, Admiral Lyra Kane observed the Council's recovery with detached calm. The bridge was dim, lit only by the blue glow of holographic data streams. "The Council's economy has stabilized," her officer reported. "They are rebuilding at a cautious pace." Lyra nodded. "Good. Let them. But maintain observation. If they try to rearm beyond their defense limits, shut it down." The officer hesitated. "You think they'll risk it after what happened?" Lyra's expression didn't change. Arrogance doesn't die easily. It only sleeps. She walked to the viewport, her reflection merging with the sea of stars beyond. "We didn't destroy them because we wanted peace," she said quietly. "We let them live because we needed a lesson to last. Fear fades. Understanding endures." She turned to her officers. "Never forget that. One day, they'll test the line again, and when they do, we'll remind them why it should never be crossed." Back on the council capital, tensions were already stirring beneath the surface. Not everyone shared Dravik's fear of humanity. Some of the younger generations, born after the Great Silence, saw humans as mythical rather than real. They whispered in hidden forums, calling themselves the Brave Dawn. They believed the Council's fear had weakened the galaxy. We can't live forever under human mercy, one young politician declared during a closed meeting. They taught us humility, yes, but they also crippled us. We need independence. We need to prove we're not children begging for permission. It began as rhetoric, but like all dangerous ideas, it spread. In secret, a coalition of engineers began rebuilding old technology, the kind made before humanity's influence. They designed new communication codes, new engines, new encryption that could bypass Terran locks. At first, it seemed harmless. But the moment they tested their first prototype, deep in the Orion belt, the entire system went dark. Panic spread through their command center. "System failure," shouted an engineer. "Everything's shutting down." Another screamed, "Something's overriding us. It's human code." Then, before they could react, the screens flickered to life. A single sentence appeared, "You were warned." And then, the entire facility imploded, quietly, without explosion, as if erased from existence. Back at the council capital, reports flooded in. Dravik read them in silence, his hands trembling. Karen stood nearby, horrified. "They tried to build outside the human systems," she whispered. "And they're gone." Dravik closed his eyes. The humans didn't destroy them out of anger. They did it to keep balance. They warned us once. That was their second warning. There won't be a third. 4 days afterward, the galaxy fell silent again. No one dared to test humanity's patience anymore. Broadcasts from every world called for peace, cooperation, and respect for Terran law. In schools, children were taught of the day of silence, the moment when humanity had saved the galaxy from its own arrogance. Statues of human figures began to appear on alien worlds, not in chains or as conquerors, but as guardians, tall and calm, their eyes forever watching the stars. On Earth, deep within the Terran Assembly Dome, the human ambassador stood before the governing council. Around him sat the leaders of humanity's scattered colonies, each representing a different branch of the once fractured species. "The council has learned its lesson, for now," he said. "But they still look to us with fear. Fear alone won't keep peace forever. We must build something stronger." An older admiral leaned forward. "Respect." The ambassador nodded. "Respect, built through action. We remain their silent watchers, but also their quiet protectors. If they stumble, we guide. If they forget, we remind." His eyes hardened slightly. "But if they return to their old arrogance, we finish what we began." He looked up at the massive display showing the galaxy, the same stars humanity had once reached for in hope, and now held in restraint. "They thought our calm was weakness," he said softly. "They were wrong. Our calm is control. And as long as we remain calm, the galaxy remains alive." Back on the council world, Dravik walked alone through the old council chamber. Dust floated through the air where once thousands had gathered in pride. He placed his clawed hand on the cold marble table and whispered, "You were right, Ambassador. It wasn't peace you gave us. It was time to become better." Outside, the night sky shimmered with the faint trails of Terran ships moving silently between stars. No one knew their missions, their destinations, or their purpose. They simply watched, unblinking, eternal. The galaxy had mocked humanity's calm once, and it had nearly destroyed them all. Now, that calm had become the very thing holding everything together. And somewhere, beyond the reach of any telescope, a single human voice echoed through encrypted space, soft as a whisper, strong as thunder, "We are still calm. Don't make us prove what happens when we're not."